I advise you to sit back down. The lawyer wasn't looking at me. He was looking at my mother. Lila's fingers were already tightening around her purse strap. My father, Thomas, had just finished whispering something smug about family loyalty, because the first half of the will had already been read, and it sounded generous. Properties divided, investment accounts allocated, structured payouts. Not everything, but enough to make their gamble worth the trip. They hadn't spoken to Uncle Victor in 15 years, not once. But death makes people nostalgic for money. The conference table was glossy black, cold under my palms. I sat at the far end, not near them, not near the lawyer, just watching. Before we conclude, the attorney said calmly, there is a secondary directive. My mother forced a small laugh. Oh, Victor always loved drama. She knew. Her voice had shifted. The lawyer slid a narrow envelope across the table. Not thick, not dramatic. Thin, precise. The contents of this document override portions of the prior reading under one condition. My father frowned. What condition? The lawyer didn't answer immediately. He opened it. I watched my mother's face closely, and when he said the first sentence, she stopped breathing. Before I tell you what was in that second envelope, you need to understand something. I was 13 when my parents decided I was inconvenient. Not unloved, not tragic. Inconvenient. My name is Neris Calder. At 13, I was quiet, observant, the kind of child who noticed when utility bills piled up unopened, the kind who understood tension before voices rose. My father had a business that was about to take off for 7 straight years. My mother had expensive taste and thin patience. The night they left wasn't dramatic. No screaming, no slammed doors, just luggage rolling across hardwood floors. We'll be back in a week, my mother said casually, adjusting her coat. Victor offered to let you stay at his place. It'll be good for you. Good for me. That's how abandonment sounds when it's polished. Uncle Victor Damaris wasn't warm. He was disciplined. He lived alone in a modern townhouse overlooking the river. No clutter, no wasted movement. When he opened the door that night, he didn't hug me. He stepped aside. You'll need structure, he said simply. I didn't cry. I didn't ask when my parents were coming back, because even at 13, I knew. They weren't coming back for me. They were stepping away from responsibility. And Uncle Victor, he wasn't rescuing me. He was observing me, as if I were an equation he intended to solve. What my parents didn't understand was this. When they left me behind, they didn't discard me. They repositioned me. And 15 years later, that repositioning was sitting across from them at a conference table, waiting for a sentence that would change everything. Uncle Victor didn't believe in comfort. He believed in leverage. The first week I stayed with him, he handed me a spiral notebook. Write down what you notice, he said. About what? Everything. So I did. Who called him? Who owed him? Who hesitated before answering a question? Who lied with their eyes but not their mouth? Victor wasn't just wealthy. He was strategic. He didn't build factories or tech startups. He built outcomes. He specialized in hostile buyouts and litigation recovery. When companies collapsed, he stepped in, dissected the damage, and extracted value where others saw ruin. And he taught me one rule. Money isn't power, he said once, tapping the notebook in my hand. Documentation is. While other girls were worried about prom, I was learning contract language. I understood indemnity clauses at 16, risk exposure at 18, corporate liability by 20. But he never once told me I was lucky. He never said he saved me. Instead, he said something far colder. Your parents made a decision. That decision had a price. Every decision does. He didn't explain what that meant, not then. But every year on December 14th, the day they left me, he would transfer a small amount of money into a separate account under my name. Not a gift, an entry. When I asked him once what the account was for, he only said, "Evidence accrues interest." And I didn't understand that sentence fully until I saw the second envelope on the conference table. Because my mother recognized it immediately, which meant she knew what had been accruing. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. "To Thomas and Leela Calder," he began, reading from the primary document. "Victor Damaris leaves the Riverside duplex property and the corresponding investment trust." My father exhaled, relieved. My mother's posture softened. The duplex alone was worth 7 figures. The trust? More. They had calculated this morning carefully. Funeral attendance, tears on cue, stories about reconnecting. They believed time had erased 15 years of absence. The lawyer continued, "To my nieces and extended relatives, designated allocations are detailed in Appendix A. Minor sums, structured payouts, nothing extravagant." Then he looked at me. "To Neris Calder, I leave executive authority over Damaris Holdings and control of all legal review assets." My father barely reacted. Control sounded administrative, not lucrative. They thought the real value had already been distributed. They were wrong. Because the real value was in what hadn't been read yet. The lawyer paused, cleared his throat. "And now, as instructed, we will review the conditional directive." My mother's face tightened. "Victor didn't need conditions," she said quickly. The lawyer ignored her. He broke the red seal on the thin envelope. The paper inside was older, dated 15 years ago, signed, witnessed, notarized. And when he began reading the first paragraph, my father leaned forward. My mother didn't move at all, because she already knew what it was. And she knew it wasn't about inheritance. It was about liability. The lawyer's voice didn't change. He didn't dramatize it. He simply read, "On December 14th, 15 years ago, Thomas and Leela Calder entered into a private financial agreement with Victor Damaris." My father frowned immediately. "That was a personal matter," he interrupted. The lawyer didn't look up. "In exchange for the settlement of outstanding business debts totaling $840,000, my mother's hand tightened around the edge of the table. "The Calders agreed to transfer full financial guardianship of their minor daughter, Neris Calder, and relinquish all future claim to dependent tax filings, educational credits, and trust allocations." The room went very still. Guardianship transfer. That part was legal. Cold, but legal. The lawyer turned the page. "Furthermore, the Calders agreed to file one final joint tax submission declaring the minor as an active dependent for the fiscal year, despite physical transfer of guardianship, in order to secure an emergency liquidity extension." My father's face drained. "That was standard tax timing," he started. The lawyer stopped him. It was not. He placed another document beside the first, an IRS notice, audit flag, deferred investigation. My heart didn't race. It didn't need to, because this wasn't a surprise to me. I had seen these documents before. I had helped Victor catalog them. Mr. Damaris elected not to pursue legal action at the time, the lawyer continued. Instead, he structured a delayed execution clause. My mother's voice cracked. "What does that mean?" The lawyer met her eyes. "It means the inheritance you just received becomes void if the injured party chooses to activate the claim." 15 years of silence converted into leverage, and the injured party was me. My father stood up so fast his chair scraped violently against the floor. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "We never harmed her. She lived better with Victor than she ever would have with us." There it was, the justification, the reframing. My mother found her voice next. "You're twisting this," she said sharply to the lawyer. "We transferred guardianship legally. That tax filing was transitional, technical." "Fraud," the lawyer corrected calmly. Silence pressed into the room like pressure before a storm. He slid another document forward. Wire transfer confirmations, debt clearance receipts, an addendum bearing both of my parents' signatures. "Victor settled your failing manufacturing loan in exchange for custody and a promise of financial separation." My father swallowed. You can't retroactively punish us for surviving. I'm not, I said for the first time. My voice didn't shake. It didn't need volume. I leaned forward slightly. I'm evaluating whether to enforce damages. My mother stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. You wouldn't sue us, she whispered. Not because she thought I wouldn't, because she realized I could. The lawyer clarified. If Neris activates the claim, the duplex property and trust revert to Damaris Holdings. Additionally, statutory penalties apply. My father's eyes widened. What penalties? The lawyer didn't blink. Back taxes, interest, civil fraud multipliers, estimated total liability. He glanced at the numbers. Approximately $2.4 million. My mother's hand slipped from the table. The room tilted for her. They had arrived expecting millions. They were leaving facing ruin. And I hadn't raised my voice once. The room didn't explode. It deflated. My father sat back down slowly, as if the air had been removed from him. You're not actually going to do this, he said, quieter now, not commanding, calculating. My mother leaned toward me. Neris, we gave you a better life, she insisted. Victor was stable. We weren't. You thrived because of that. I studied her face, not for emotion, for truth. And here's the thing about truth. It doesn't care about comfort. You didn't give me a better life, I said evenly. You negotiated me out of your balance sheet. That landed, because that's what it was. They were drowning in debt. They had leverage in one place, me. Victor paid their liabilities. They filed one more dependent year to unlock emergency liquidity. They statalized, and they walked away. Not because they hated me, because they needed cash. The lawyer cleared his throat. Ms. Calder, do you wish to activate enforcement? One sentence, one choice, and legally, I had every right. 15 years of compound interest, civil penalties, asset seizure. I could dismantle them financially before they left this building. My father leaned forward. If you do this, he said quietly, you end us. I didn't blink. You ended us first. Silence again. The weight of a decision only one person in the room could make. The inheritance wasn't the weapon. The lawsuit was. The duplex, the trust, the penalties, all hanging on one word from me. Activate or don't. And that's when I did something they didn't see coming. I didn't say activate. I didn't say forgive. I said something else. Transfer the duplex and the trust to Damaris Holdings immediately. Nullify their inheritance under the conditional clause. The lawyer nodded once. That was within my authority. My mother's face drained. So you're taking it back, she whispered. Yes. But you're not suing, my father asked cautiously. I met his eyes. No. Confusion replaced panic. They had prepared for war. They hadn't prepared for removal. I'm not interested in destroying you. I'm interested in separating from you. The penalties remained documented. The fraud remained recorded. But I declined civil enforcement. No public lawsuit. No court filings. No headlines. Just this. They left with nothing. Not debt, not prison. Just nothing. Exactly the amount of involvement they gave me at 13. 0. My mother's voice trembled. You'd really walk away? I stood. I already did, 15 years ago. The lawyer began gathering the papers. My father didn't argue. He didn't threaten, because he understood leverage now. He understood that I had chosen restraint, and that restraint was power. They walked out of the conference room smaller than they entered, not ruined, just erased. And I stayed seated, because this wasn't about revenge. It was about architecture, not buildings, boundaries. The duplex was an asset. The trust was liquidity. But that wasn't what Victor built for me. He left me control over Damaris Holdings, private equity, litigation strategy, acquisition frameworks. He didn't rescue me. He repositioned me. And more importantly, he taught me something my parents never understood. When someone trades you for convenience, don't trade back in anger. Trade up in leverage. The account he created on December 14th wasn't sentimental. It was symbolic. Every year, a deposit. Every year, documentation preserved. Not because he wanted me to collect interest, because he wanted me to understand choice. The second envelope wasn't revenge. It was permission. Permission to hold them accountable, or to let them fade. I chose fade. Because lawsuits create noise, indifference creates silence, and silence, when controlled, is louder. People think inheritance is money. It isn't. It's positioning. My parents left me at 13 because I was inconvenient. At 28, I was no longer inconvenient. I was independent. There's a difference. They came to that will reading expecting millions. They left with a lesson. You cannot abandon responsibility and expect loyalty in return. And you cannot treat a child like a financial variable and expect that variable not to mature. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't threaten. I made one structural correction: separation. Permanent. My name is Neris Calder. At 13, I was moved like an asset. At 28, I chose not to be claimed like one. If you've ever been repositioned by someone else's decision, remember this: being left behind is not the same as being left powerless. Like the video, subscribe for more stories where leverage wins quietly, and tell me, would you have activated the lawsuit?